How can therapy help you with your relationship with a highly critical parent? That's a question I was asked recently. My name's Ruthann. I'm a clinical psychologist and an expert in relationships and issues of narcissism. In this video, I'm going to talk about how I might help someone who has a very critical parent. Now, I work using schema therapy mostly, so that's the model of therapy that I'm going to use here. Other therapists might do things differently. Doesn't mean they're wrong. It's just different ways of working. But I hope, whether you're in therapy or not, this video gives you some ideas of how you can cope with the effects of growing up with a highly critical parent, and also how you may be able to transform your relationship with them for the better today. You have two tasks to do in this relationship. The first is to cope with the inner critic, the critic in your head that's developed as a result of those messages from your highly critical parent. The second is to somehow navigate the relationship with your parent today. If you've grown up with a highly critical parent, you may have developed certain ideas about yourself, a certain way of experiencing yourself and your relationships. You may see yourself as defective or as a failure. You may view other people as critical or punitive towards you. In schema therapy, we call these your core schemas that stem from your unmet need for warmth and acceptance and unconditional love from your parent or caregiver. Now, those schemas are the core ways that you see yourself and your relationships. But you also have what we call schema modes. Now, schema modes are not as permanent as schemas. They change quite frequently. Where schemas may be are traits, the permanent characteristics, our modes are the states, the way we are day to day. If you have a very critical parent, it's likely that you have a strong inner critic mode. That inner critic is probably the internalized voice of your parent and other critical influences that may speak to you in ways that are critical, demanding, or punitive. And you'll also have an inner child mode, an anxious inner child who feels the sting of those words and the criticism, and who probably feels quite ashamed and anxious and alone and neglected in response to that criticism. And you probably also have various coping modes. You may have a mode of shutting down, becoming avoidant, and withdrawing from your critical parent or from other people in your life if you think they may be critical towards you. You may have a mode of striving to be perfect, to be in control, to live up to unrelenting standards and impossible levels of perfection. You may have a people-pleasing mode who placates and tiptoes around people. Or maybe you even have an angry child mode who becomes enraged and gets angry in response to criticism. Or you may have an angry protector mode who goes on the attack, who's very defensive and really quite hostile. And you also have a healthy adult mode, the grown-up version of you that can see things through a more objective lens, that can see the whole picture, that can make some sense of what's going on, and can view you through a lens of compassion. Now, it may be that that part of you is underdeveloped, and a lot of the work in therapy and in any kind of personal growth and development is really nurturing that healthy, grown-up, warm, wise, compassionate side of you. Because that side of you can comfort and nurture and meet the needs of your inner child. And they can also make wise decisions about your coping modes. Maybe the volume needs to be turned down, or they need to step aside, or you need to develop other ways of coping with difficult people or difficult situations, or even your relationships in general. Your healthy adult is much more flexible and able to act with a sense of self-assuredness in your own best interests. So how can you actually go about doing this? Well, one of the first things you can do is to try to get a different perspective on the criticism, particularly your inner critic. The chances are you would never talk to other people the way your inner critic talks to you. And it's also likely that people close to you would view the messages of your inner critic as cruel and hostile and indefensible. So, a really helpful thing to do is to take a step back and try to view the inner critic through a different lens. You could imagine what you would say to a friend if your inner critic was speaking to them that way. You can imagine what a good friend might say to you if they heard the way in which your inner critic talked to you. You might even invite someone close to you to respond to your inner critic. When I work with couples, I quite often ask someone's partner to counteract the message of their inner critic. By changing your perspective, you can start to see the inner critic from a different viewpoint, and you can start to be more questioning of the messages of the inner critic. That changes your perspective, but it may not change how you feel on the inside. The next important step might be to learn how to relate to your inner child with love and compassion and tenderness. In therapy, we might do that in our imaginations, or we may write letters to our inner child, or talk to our inner child in soft and soothing and warm and encouraging tones. You can also engage in intentional behaviors that meet your inner child's needs, giving your inner child time to relax, to play, speaking to yourself with encouragement and warmth, and also making time for rest and recovery, particularly if you're someone who has unrelenting standards and tends to strive towards impossibly high standards of perfection. As you begin to feel warmer and more compassionate towards your inner child, you can also strengthen that healthy adult voice, your ability to talk to yourself in self assured, compassionate, and warm tones. You can also begin to intentionally change your relationship patterns to bring more flexibility to your coping modes. That's going to look different for different people. You may need to work on being less defensive, or you may need to work on being more assertive. You might need to practice more self acceptance and talking to yourself with a warm, forgiving, encouraging tone of voice. You may need to learn how to relax, how to be more accepting of yourself. In no way am I suggesting that this is an easy task. It can be changing and developing new behaviors after many, many years of conditioning and patterning. So, this is a process that takes time and requires a lot of patience. And progress is never linear, there will be ups and downs. Hopefully, as you do, you can strengthen your inner adult and better meet the needs of your little self, helping them to become less anxious, more relaxed, and more playful. Now, the next stage I suggest may be difficult, but it's often worthwhile. And that is to try to view your parent through the lens of your healthy adult. Now, this can mean really appreciating complexity, ambiguity, and contradictions. You may want to guess at some of the reasons that your parent is the way that they are. And you may also want to guess at what their intention may be, because the intention of their behavior may be very different from the effect. They may have intended to correct you. They may have intended to help you become a better person, to cope better in the world. They may have imagined that they were helping you and protecting you from the criticism and the rejection of other people by making you perfect. Now, these may have been misguided behaviors and they may have had negative effects. And of course, a grown up parent is responsible for the way in which they treat a little child. However, by understanding your parent with empathy, I mean empathy, I don't necessarily mean agreement or permissiveness or even forgiveness, but simply understanding some of the complexity, some of the intentions behind their behaviors can help you get a different perspective on it. And that can be very, very helpful. Now, as this happens, you're getting more in touch with your little self. You're much better at meeting their needs. You're much better at treating yourself with warmth and compassion. Your coping modes are hopefully the volume is being turned down and you have a lot more flexibility. And you have a much healthier, more assured, and self compassionate grown up. Then you're going to go and see your parent again. Well, I'm going to ask you this question. Which part of you is going to meet up with your parent? Who is going to show up? And I often suggest to people that they even imagine taking their little self and putting them somewhere safe, leaving them somewhere else and imagining that they're going as their healthy grown up self to meet with their parent. And your healthy grown up self has a much wiser perspective on their criticism. They're much more able to see their criticism as unjustified and unwarranted, and less likely to be so severely stung by it. You may also want to think about some practical boundaries and ways of managing the relationship with your parent. You may want to reduce the time that you spend with them if prolonged contact tends to lead to conflict. You may want to focus your meeting up with them around activities that you can enjoy together rather than intense conversations. Or you may want to think about the time of day you visit. For example, if your parent tends to drink in the evenings and that tends to fuel arguments, perhaps it might be better for you to visit early in the day. There's no hard and fast rules here, but you can be a little bit wise and thoughtful and considered in the kind of ways that you relate to your parent and the timing and what you do when you're together. It's hard to give hard and fast rules as to what is going to work because I don't know you and I don't know your parent, but I'll give you some suggestions. However, the most important thing here is that whatever you do, it's your healthy adult steering the ship. You may choose to ignore the criticism if that's possible. Or you may choose to empathize with your parent. You can do something that my friend and colleague Wendy Berry suggests, which is called empathic confrontation. And that's combining empathy with confrontation. So you may empathize with your parent. You may also acknowledge their good intentions. I know that you're trying to protect me, that you're trying to help me improve myself, that your intention is not to be critical, but to be honest with you. I actually really feel hurt by the things that you say and the ways that you speak to me. You might want to invite them to consider the impact that their words have on you. Or you may even ask that certain topics are out of bounds. For example, your body weight or what you're eating. Or my personal favorite, which a lot of the people I work with really like, is to say to a parent, you know what? I appreciate that you're trying to help me to improve myself, that you always look out for the ways that I can be a better person. But I need to tell you something. You did a great job raising me. I'm a good person and I've got this. You can relax now. Now, I make no promises and I cannot predict how your critical parent is going to respond. However, if your healthy adult can show up and steer the ship, who knows what might be possible? And it is certainly my experience that many people are pleasantly surprised at what becomes possible, even with a very critical parent, when they're able to leave their coping modes and their little self at home and show up to meet their parent as a healthy, sturdy, self-assured adult. I hope this video has been helpful. I'd love to hear what you think and how you cope with a critical or demanding or punitive parent in your life and what's worked for you. Leave a comment, hit the like button if you like this video, subscribe if you'd like to hear more from me. I look forward to seeing you next time, and in the meantime, take good care.